School Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yamin of Revolution, U.S. soldier, calls to take our Trump. We got a World War III update. But before we get into that, y'all be sure to wipe y'all feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform. Y'all, revolution is for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I got some revolutionary lunch for y'all. Let's get into the content. Salute.
There is no doubt in my mind that the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, is the Antichrist. He is a false Messiah, and he is your enemy, and he must be killed. Why do I believe this? President Trump posted an AI-generated image of him in the likeness of Jesus Christ. He has also criticized the Pope. He is nothing like Jesus Christ. In Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 3 through 12, Apostle Paul describes the man of lawlessness, otherwise known as the Antichrist, for God and country. This is the motto of my campaign. I decided to run for office to fix our broken political system, to restore bipartisanship, return power to the working class, and to end our system of Washington insiders, extremism, and excuses from our current members of Congress. I've reached a turning point in my campaign. Why? I've come to the realization that our country is broken. We are led by a president who's the enemy of God, and President Trump will never bring us together like God intended. Democrats are wrong because they're wrong on the common sense issues. Enforcement of our criminal laws, border security, national security, and social issues that are 80-20. Republicans are wrong because they never address the racism and discrimination that has persisted in our country for generations. Is our country salvageable? Maybe it is. Our founding fathers intended us to be the freest country on this planet, and that's what we became. But in doing so, we became the most selfish. We turned away from God. We turned away from love and kindness, and we turned away from putting others first. I served in the United States Marine Corps. I swore an oath when I commissioned. I, William Upham, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, so help me God. I joined the United States Marine Corps to defend our country against all enemies, including the enemies here at home. This principle of defending others, especially the innocent and the vulnerable, is seen in the Bible in many passages. In Esther chapter 8, verse 11, the prime minister of Persia authorized the right for Jews to defend themselves and women and children from armed attackers. In Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 13, builders armed themselves and were stationed for self-defense purposes, with Nehemiah stating, "Fight for your brothers, your sons, and your daughters." This biblical principle can be summarized in the following. God values life, and although self-defense is not explicitly endorsed, it is implied through these passages, and it should be used to protect the innocent and the vulnerable. Violence should never be used for evil purposes, such as vengeance or plunder. This is a message to all of God's children in our country. We must defend ourselves against all enemies. We are at war with evil. This is a war between God and the Antichrist. There is no doubt in my mind that the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, is the Antichrist. He is a false Messiah, and he is your enemy, and he must be killed. Why do I believe this? President Trump posted an AI-generated image of him in the likeness of Jesus Christ. He has also criticized the Pope. He is nothing like Jesus Christ. In Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 3 through 12, Apostle Paul describes the man of lawlessness, otherwise known as the Antichrist, as someone who opposes God, worships himself, and claims to be God. In Revelation chapter 13, verses 1 through 8, John describes the Antichrist as a ruler backed by Satan who demands to be worshipped, blasphemes God, and wages war on our saints. All of these Antichrist descriptions describe President Trump. If you disagree with me, you must ask yourself, is your perspective clouded by mega ideology? Are you worshiping a false idol? Is President Trump anything like Jesus Christ? The book of Revelation is occurring right now. America is Babylon. God and his angels have condemned our country because we are drowning in sin. Who are we now? We are selfish, worshiping ourselves and false idols, not showing love or kindness to our fellow American, and treating life without love and dignity. Instead of remembering our founding fathers' intention of a nation under God, we have lost sight of God and treated him like he was an accessory. We've become too proud to be an American and not proud enough to be God's child. I ask this question to all of you. Is it too late for us to turn from our sins? Is it too late for America? My answer is no. It's not too late. The Lamb will be sacrificed to pay for all of our sins, and our country will be saved from the Babylon that we have become. President Trump is the Antichrist, and he will be killed and sent to hell. God will prevail against evil.
Trump will be killed. Everybody wants him dead.
New reports from Iranian state and IRGC-affiliated media say Bahrain's energy infrastructure has come under attack amid the rapidly escalating conflict between Iran and the United States. According to the reports, Iranian drones struck facilities operated by Babco, Bahrain's national petroleum company, targeting oil refining and energy infrastructure. Iranian outlets say the operation was part of a broader wave of coordinated attacks aimed at U.S.-linked military and strategic sites across Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, Jordan, and Iraq. Some reports describe smoke and fires near the refinery complex on Bahrain's Sitra Island, with the strikes presented as retaliation for recent U.S. attacks on Iranian targets. The reported operation comes after Tehran warned that Gulf energy infrastructure could become a target if U.S. military operations against Iran continued. However, there is no independent confirmation of the reported strike at this time. Neither Bahraini authorities, BAPCO, nor U.S. officials have confirmed that the refinery was hit or reported damage, casualties, or disruptions to operations. Videos circulating online that allegedly show explosions and fires have not been independently verified, and their authenticity, location, and timing remain unclear. BAPCO operates Bahrain's largest oil refinery, processing hundreds of thousands of barrels of crude every day and serving as a critical hub for the country's fuel production and exports. The refinery has previously been affected during earlier phases of the 2026 conflict, with attacks causing fires and temporary operational disruptions. The latest reports fit a broader pattern of escalating exchanges between Washington and Tehran, with military installations, shipping routes, and strategic energy infrastructure increasingly caught in the crossfire. As competing narratives emerge from both sides, officials and analysts are urging caution until satellite imagery, official statements, or independent reporting can verify what happened. The situation remains fluid, and more information is expected as authorities assess the reported incident.
Following the American strikes on civilian infrastructure last night in Iran, the Iranian response came, and it came very heavily. Iran is expanding the range of attacks now, the quality and the intensity, with more lethal strikes against American assets in the region. If you recall, yesterday, the American terror forces targeted a bridge in Iran alongside civilian infrastructure, killing and wounding Iranian civilians. The American attacks against Iran are now targeting more civilians than military installations and facilities, which indicates that Trump is now trying to directly hurt the Iranian people rather than just have attacks against the Iranian armed forces. The Iranian response soon came after these attacks from the United States, and we saw multiple explosions happening in multiple parts of the Kuwait and the Iraq border alongside other areas. These were some of the attacks that Iran carried out yesterday following the American strikes against the country. It didn't stop there. The IRGC launched a new wave in the Nasr operation, Nasr 2 operations that they've been conducting since the aggression restarted between the United States and Iran, and they expanded their attacks. The official statement and declaration came from the Iranian armed forces, and it was as follows. Iran targeted multiple locations in the Al-Tanf base in Syria, American bases in Kuwait, Bahrain, and Oman. Al-Tanf base in Syria is for the first time being targeted by the IRGC. They announced that they attacked sites in Syria, Kuwait, and confirmed that oil and gas export ban through the Strait of Hormuz will continue as long as the U.S. attacks continue. The PR department of the IRGC in Iran announced on Friday that fighters from the Guards Aerospace Force carried out, as part of the 11th wave of Operation Nasr 2, a surprise operation targeting the enemy Special Operations Command Center in the Syrian Tanf region in response to the American aggression that targeted the country. The Iranian forces destroyed an enemy radar system and several helicopters in revenge for the blood of Iran's martyrs who fell last night in Iran Shahr, noting that the operation targeted a large number of American forces. The Guard added in another statement that the naval forces targeted and destroyed a maritime surveillance radar in Salama area and an American air surveillance radar in the Ghanim area of the Sultanate of Oman, and that this operation is a prelude to all the people of the provinces of Khuzestan, Bushehr, Hormuz, Ghanistan, and Baluchistan. The IRGC statement stressed that they will continue retaliatory operations with unwavering determination, and the Strait of Hormuz will remain under the control of the IRGC naval forces. They also targeted an American base in Kuwait, an enemy radar, several important weapons depots, and 2 surface-to-surface missile platforms at the American base in Kuwait. They also targeted Bahrain as well in the recent attack with the Arash suicide drones from the Iranian army, targeting P-8 reconnaissance aircraft in the Sakhir base in Bahrain. Vital strategic targets, and the geography is increasing with the Al-Tanf base in Syria. There was one short video being published by Iran. It could be the initial video that they launched for these attacks that were carried out as a retaliation, and it was primarily for the Iranian drones, as we can see in this. So Iran is in essence escalating. They're having more attacks, more parts, but are these attacks effective? That is a question many people are asking, because we saw damage last night in Iran. Is there damage from the Iranian attacks? And clearly, according to satellite imagery, there is significant damage. Let me give you a couple of examples. This is the Zayed military city in Abu Dhabi. Some before and after satellite images from the facility are as follows. This is before, this is after the attack. We can see clearly that 3 depots in this facility were completely destroyed. Of course, the United States uses that location alongside many other locations in the UAE, alongside, of course, the other Arab Gulf states, reaching Jordan and Syria too. There was also more damage being published from the Erbil airport of a Patriot system being attacked and destroyed by Iran, as we can see in the following video as well. Let's have a look at this. This is again the before and after. This is where the Patriot system was positioned. So Iran is doing damage, but the United States is doing damage too. But there's something more dangerous than just the damage. Yesterday we spoke about the potential of ground invasion, or the Trump administration preparing for an operation to take over some of the Iranian islands. However, that wouldn't be limited to Iranian islands. The United States would want to try and engage in ground battle operations alongside the Iranian borders. And where can they do that? They can do that from the Iraqi territories. And there was indeed an attempt, as confirmed by recent statements and reports, that a group of fighters has been sent to the border with Iran to secure it and prevent infiltration. Not describing who the group of fighters is. It could be an Iraqi resistance movement. They wouldn't be sent unless there is substantial information or intel that a group is about to have an infiltration. In the 40-day war, there were reports that there were several attempts. Trump tried to speak or convince some of the movements in Kurdistan to have an attack against Iran, including Iranian armed opposition groups. That plan was both Netanyahu's and Trump's plan. However, following interference from the Turkish president, that failed. And the Turkish president boasted about making it fail because, according to him, he didn't allow this plan to expand the war to happen. Iran, simultaneously with these reports of this potential attack, carried out so far one of the deadliest drone missile strikes in recent weeks against the Komala party of the Iranian Kurdistan area in Iraq, Sulaymaniyah, this morning, killing 10 members of the armed opposition group and wounding 13. As we can see in this video here, these are some of the Iranian attacks in the area. Iran wouldn't have conducted these strikes unless they had substantial information that they're about to have a ground operation against Iran. And the reason behind this is to primarily exhaust the Iranian armed forces. The United States would want to engage Iran in multiple parts so that whenever they want to have a ground operation, Iran would have less resources. Although, again, a miscalculation to say the least, Iran can have millions of people at one given moment fighting against the United States. So there's an escalation in with the distance. There's an escalation with the lethal strikes. There's an escalation from the United States with ground operation attempts. And the United States is in essence now killing innocent civilians too. Apart from what we spoke about last night, there were martyrs and wounded in the US aggression targeting an airport, 2 bridges, and a railway station. We spoke about the bridges in the airport, but there's a railway station attack from the United States too. Again, indicating that Trump is now targeting more civilian locations, not related to the Iranian army. Where are things going from here? That's a question that many people would be asking after 6 consecutive nights of operations and back and forth attacks. The attacks are very likely to continue and escalate. As days go by, we're seeing the intensity increase, the range is increasing, the barbarity of the US forces is increasing as well. And it would be a matter of time only up until there's a much bigger exchange of fire between the United States and Iran. Trump so far is trying to control the pace with Iran. He's trying to apply more pressure on the Iranian side so that it can get concessions on the negotiating table, a negotiating table that he said he left. We no longer want to talk to them. As a matter of fact, he's saying that Iran wants to talk to them now, which is very detached from reality. And as we spoke about yesterday, as we said yesterday, it's not a sustainable position to be in, neither for Iran nor for the United States. The United States is suffering huge losses, but Iran is also suffering losses from these American attacks. Is there going to be some sort of magic move happening or a real push from the mediators or an external country that hasn't participated in the mediation yet to settle things down between the two countries so that they can get back to the MOU or potentially have a new MOU? Perhaps, but it's not looking very likely. The bigger likelihood is that these escalations between Iran and the United States will continue for at least a week or two, up until things explode. And that explosion can happen any moment between now and 2 weeks ahead, because Donald Trump is clearly not calculating anything to do with the midterm elections. Benjamin Netanyahu is still out of the picture with the military involvement, but he's not out of the picture behind the scenes. Trump is doing all of Netanyahu's dirty work in Iran, but Trump is doing that work for potential financial gain where he can control or try to control the oil resources of Iran, hence why he's now targeting bridges that are leading to Iran's strategic islands they export oil from. Not the most important ones so far, but he's hinting at what's coming. And if Iran would continue not necessarily going all out against the United States, that might tempt the American side to increase the aggression. Is there a certain calculation happening here from Iran that we're not reading, or from the United States? That's very likely, because from the signing of the MOU moving forward, there were skirmishes between the United States and Iran. There were skirmishes between Iran and Israel as well. In every one of those skirmishes or back and forth attacks, there was an off-ramp given from the United States, an off-ramp given from Iran. Whenever there was an escalation, which usually came from the American side, that claimed it was Iran escalating, not them, Iran responded in a similar manner, probably slightly even more, based on or judging by the damage that has been inflicted, and we can see that damage. But most importantly, this isn't a sustainable position. This isn't a good or a safe position for Iran to be in. And it looks like it's only a matter of time up until things completely explode between the two countries. And we would stop talking about back and forth attack, but we would be talking about much larger scale waves. Iran is, of course, preparing for a long-term war of attrition with the United States, hence why they almost never go all out on anything. But they have the capacity to significantly increase the daily strikes to be much more destructive and much more damaging. When will that happen? That can happen at any given moment. There's likelihood that it can happen within a few days. There's likelihood that it can happen now. Trump is completely having reckless attacks against Iran, although he knows very well that Iran will retaliate. But at the end of the day, we're dealing with a reckless psychopath leading the United States of America. And at any given moment, he can have a total explosion that would have very many casualties in Iran.
Hi, everybody. Today is Friday, July 17, 2026, and our dear friends, Carl Wilkerson and Larry Johnson are here with us. Welcome back.
We're back.
Yeah. Let me start with what has happened last night. The attacks on the bridges in Iran. It's at least 4 bridges were confirmed that were hit by these missiles. And one of the most important ones was between Bandar Abbas and Shiraz. Shiraz is another province. Bandar Abbas is located in the west, in the southern part of Iran. Shiraz is to the southwest of Iran. And we have a footage of that. Here is the footage. And you see the damage. It's just so huge. Look at what has happened, and it's one of the main key bridges in Iran. And here is the other bridges. As you see here, we have various photos and footage coming out of Iran. And as you see, the war is getting somehow curl to the infrastructure right now. And Iran has responded. Yesterday, we had some reports that the bridge between Saudi Arabia and Bahrain was targeted, but I haven't seen any footage, any photo of that. And basically, the main attacks, looking at the targets, Iranian targets, they're attacking, the military facilities, radars, missile, depots, and all of these sort of military equipment in GCC countries, Carl. But one of them today was confirmed that Iran, Kuwait was, the Ministry of Energy in Kuwait reported that one of their desalination plants and power plants were hit in Kuwait. This is the situation. It seems that they're getting closer and closer to hit these infrastructures, which are so important right now in the region when it comes to the survival. And if they go forward and to hit these power plants and then desalination plants, that's going to be a huge problem for the whole region. Not that much for Iran when it comes to this desalination plants, but when it comes to the energy plants, that's important for Iran as well, because the southern part of Iran and the southwest of Iran is experiencing that sort of heat, and the temperature is high in those regions. Go ahead, Colonel. How do you see the situation right now?
I think we're in the same boat we've been in all along. I think it's deepening, if that's the right metaphor. It's going to sink, in other words. And I think the thing that Larry's going to appear in here later on, the LaRouche affair, had a really good encapsulation of that in the email they sent to me. Are we ready for what we're going to do? Because what we're going to do, if we keep on this track, and I don't care how accurate our bombs are against bridges and so forth, it almost looks like General Kane's trying to demonstrate that the Air Force can actually hit its targets with great precision. No one doubts that, but so can Iran. And if they move on to what I call economic targets in the region, then as this thing was predicting from the LaRouche group, we're going to be in really deep kimchi with regard to the global economy. And it's going to be every category of that economy that's impacted by what they will do in that region if they start striking those kinds of targets. And frankly, I think there's no reason why, in a military sense, in a strategic sense, they shouldn't go ahead and do that. At the same time, I've got to say that I think the approach of the United States right now, it's been this way all along. It's been this way ever since we negotiated an MOU that was against us, totally against us, and then got out of it by delaying it until after the funeral in terms of completing it or going further with it. We've been losing ever since then. If we go on and we force the Iranians into the major decision to leave the NPT, build a nuclear weapon, or reveal the nuclear weapon they already have, or anything like that, or even as dramatic, I think even more serious for the globe, they go after this other tier of targets, which will truly be globally destabilizing, we won't just have lost, the world will have lost. And that's what we're courting right now. That's what we're tempting the Iranians to do, I think.
Laurie, join in. Last time we talked, it was last night, but we didn't have that much of information about the targets. Right now, it seems that they're getting serious, and Iran fully understands that.
Baidu. That's
Beidou.
Oh, come on. Okay, Beidou. That's the difference.
I knew what he meant.
Yeah. So we go back to the 12-day war. And this is all this information is courtesy of Kevin Walmsley of Inside China Business. But Kevin does an outstanding job. I had no idea that this was the case. And the Iranians were relying upon GPS for targeting their missiles during the 12-day war. And lo and behold, it looks out because that GPS system's under U.S. control. The U.S. has a back door into it so that they can spoof geographic locations. So you can, program your missile to hit, at the corner of walk and don't walk. Then instead, it sends it outside of town. And that's why the Iranians had trouble with accuracy during the 12-day war. They, the Chinese, though, I guess this goes back to 1993, and it's again another example of the law of unintended consequences. The United States stopped. CIA claimed that this one Chinese ship was carrying some, chemical weapons or something. And the United States basically shut off the GPS so the Chinese vessel couldn't move. And ultimately, it was resolved. Turned out the CIA was wrong. Oh, shocker! That never happened. And the Chinese went, we need to have an alternative system, and they said about constructing Beidou, and it is actually better than GPS. They're on like their third generation. They've got more satellites, and Iran started using Beidou on February 28th, which is why their strikes have been so precise. And the United States has had one of those, oh shit moments that, they no longer could interfere and manipulate. Now, Iran's tactical objectives are much easier to achieve than the U.S. tactical objectives. The U.S. tactical objectives are to degrade Iran's ability to launch drones and missiles at ships. Well, I imagine between the Bandar Lechem, I think it is, which is north of Qasem Island, all the way down to Sirik. That's about 200 miles. I imagine there's at least 1,000 launch sites along that coastline. So the task of the United States trying to take out all of those is difficult. They blew up these bridges in order to try to disrupt logistic support to the coastal areas. And that may have an effect. But all Iran has to do is blow the hell out of 9 bases in Kuwait, in Bahrain, in Qatar, in UAE, and the 2 Air Force bases in Jordan. And they are doing exactly that. They're hitting them with precision. They're taking out warehouses. They're taking out storage sites. I saw one news flash that the Triton drone, which is a $250 million drone, you can imagine that, was based in Jordan, and they pulled it back to like Cyprus or Italy, the U.S. Air base there. So all Iran has to do is continue to destroy these U.S. bases, 9 of them actually, destroy those. Then all of a sudden, the United States no longer has a presence in the Middle East. They have to go to Israel. And look at what Israel tried to do the other day. The Minister of Transportation said, get your KC-135s out of here. Why? Because it makes him a big fat target. Now, it was Bibi Netanyahu reversed that on Wednesday. But the fact that there was someone in the Israeli government saying, get the KC-135s out of here. And where this is headed is that the United States is going to be forced to retreat to bases inside Israel. And at that point, Iran will begin taking those out. And I believe we're going to see targeting inside Israel at some point, if this continues on this trajectory, that will include the destruction of the Dimona nuclear facility. So that's where we're headed.
And what a rich target that would make ultimately for Iran's announcement of having a nuclear weapon.
Yeah, well,
U.S. and Israel, one fell swoop.
You know, the I forget who it was in the legislature that announced was 2 weeks ago, said, look, if the United States attacks us, so now they have attacked them, we're going to shut down the Bab el-Mandab Strait. We're going to review our nuclear doctrine. Well, when your current doctrine is don't build anything, a review means we're going to build something. And then they were going to withdraw from the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty. So, yeah, this is if the United States' goal in this was to keep Iran from getting a nuke, they've done everything to inspire them to get one.
There you go.
Carol, looking at the way Iran is fighting it strategically, do you think that Larry just mentioned the way that it could work out for Iran? But from your point of view, when you look at Israel is doing is rebuilding some sort of military bases in the southern part of Lebanon. There was some reports just moments ago. We've learned that they're in the southern part of Lebanon in a town in the town of Khiam. They're saying that they have destroyed the whole town and they're constructing a military base there. This is the agenda on the part of Israel. But when it comes to the middle, basically they're dividing two forces. One of them is Israel in the southern part of Lebanon and the United States in the Middle East fighting Iran. How do you see the strategy of Iranians as time goes by? They're mostly focused on the military bases and and radars in the region. But how much of their how much of their concern comes from the case of Lebanon? How do you see the case of Lebanon in their calculation?
I think basically what's happening on the side of Israel and the United States is essentially tactical. I think what's happening on the side of Iran is essentially fundamentally strategic. And I go back to that headline in Haaretz that said all Iran had to do to not lose or to win was to not lose. And all the United States and Bibi had to do is to win spectacularly. Well, we know, and we had it thrown into our face with this MOU, particularly paragraph 5. When you look at what we surrendered there, you understand how desperate we were and why we canceled any further negotiations, because that was turning everything over that was fundamental to Iran's strategy, at least half of it, because I think it's all about the nuclear program on the one hand, it's 50%, the other, it's about the Strait of Hormuz. And as Larry has said now, maybe the Red Sea too. Those are strategic advantages for Iran that we can do nothing about tactically. I don't care how many bombs we drop. I don't care how resolute we are and how accurate we are. We can't disturb those strategic realities for Iran. Not unless we're willing to put 2 or 3 million troops on the ground, scour the country from one end to the other, lose 200,000 or 300,000 of those troops, spend $2 or $3 trillion and spend 10 years and have it look like Afghanistan at the end, or maybe slightly better. That's the only way we can do that. We are not equipped to do that. We're not capable of doing that. So all Iran has got to do is hold out. That's all they have to do. And these machinations in Lebanon or in Syria or biting Turkey down or whatever, they're irrelevant to the advantage that Iran has. And I haven't even mentioned Russia and China, primarily the latter, being on their side and having demonstrated that conclusively now.
Yeah, let me add to that because even though China and Pakistan just came out and calling upon the return to negotiations, which this confirms.
Revolutionary salute to our brother Jeremiah Reed for the donation to the war chest. Revolution is a way of life. I absolutely appreciate that, little soldier. Salute.
So, Pepe Escobar and I have been reporting that, the PACs have been playing this major role in trying to get the negotiations going or keeping it alive, but they're doing it at the behest of China. On the one hand, China, economically is getting hurt a little bit by what's going on with the shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz. On the other hand, what we are witnessing with the United States and the munitions that it's firing. So, I had some, I always credit Ambrose Bierce. He said that war was God's way of teaching Americans geography. Well, I'll just add to that, man, it teaches you a lot of other things about oil, about U.S. missile supplies. And so I kept hearing that, they're launching HIMARS. Well, they don't launch HIMARS. A HIMARS is a launcher. So what is the HIMARS launching? Well, it has 3 types of missiles it can launch. One of them is a guided missile multiple launcher, which travels about 20 miles. So forget that. They're not launching. They're not using that. Then they have the ATACMS. But the problem with the ATACMS is they've got a limited range too of about 180 miles. So they're left with this thing called the precision strike missile. Travels 300 miles, robust, except Lockheed Martin has only made 56 of them. So, if they're firing 8 a day, they'll use those up in a week. So that leaves us with the Tomahawk. Well, we're running out of those. Same with the JASSM. The Joint Air Surface Strike Missile, I think is what it's called. Again, it's a cruise missile fired from one of the aircraft. And the same with HARMS, the HARM missile. So if you look at it from China's standpoint, they're going, every day the United States is sending a missile into an Iranian position, blowing up some sand in the desert. That's one less missile the United States has to fire at us. And I think the Chinese are actually secretly more than happy to have the United States punching itself to the point of exhaustion, trying to defeat Iran. And that's one of the other dynamics that's at play here.
Old Confucian saying, when your enemy is defeating himself, leave him alone.
Yeah.
Or you could add to that, Chinese communism with capitalistic characteristics, add a little when you can.
Colonel, we've learned that the United States is sending more F-16s to the region, to the Middle East. And General Keane had an interview hours ago on Fox News. He says that what the United States is doing is Operation Freedom, the same operation that they tried to use before. And the argument, here is the argument on his part.
We're executing Project Freedom. Remember, that was the plan to open the Straits of Hormuz back on May the 4th. It was a plan that, at that time, to be about 2 weeks in length. It was a very comprehensive plan, and we're executing it. And we're not naming it, but that's the fact. And that plan is, one, to secure the straits, to clear the straits, and then also to protect shipping. And what you're seeing is one, the focus to take down all the means for them to interfere with shipping, missiles, drones, fast boats, and then the things that help and enable it, command and control, sensors, radars, and the logistical infrastructure support for it. And then we're also hitting Iran's ability to retaliate against the Gulf states, U.S. bases, or Israel if they choose to do that as well. And that's ballistic missiles, launch systems, and also drone inventory and storage sites. Isolating the Straits of Hormuz was always part of the plan. So that's why you see bridges being destroyed, because we don't want them to come in and be able to reinforce logistically and begin to recover the capabilities that were taken away from them. So nothing different about this. We just never saw Project Freedom being executed fully. Remember, it got stopped in the 36th hour, something outrageous by Saudi Arabia, if you recall, who would not permit us to fly out of their air base and not permit us to use their airspace, and also put pressure on us to stop the operation. So this takes some time to unfold, to truly get it right. And hopefully this time we'll be able to complete it and get it right. And then here's what we got to remember. For Iran, the Straits of Hormuz is a strategic asset. No matter what happens here, they will continue to want to take it back from us because it's number one. They don't have a nuclear power capability. They're not even close to developing a weapon now. This is their number one strategic asset. It gives them leverage over the Gulf states in the region, and they truly want to have an element of control here. And they are willing to fight us for it, and we have got to take it away from them and prevent them from ever getting it back under their control again.
Yeah. Let's finish this operation. The last. Carl, he mentioned a lot of points when it comes
Didn't
to
he? He covered he covered the boardwalk, everything. He wanted to throw it all out there, get all that garbage out there on the table, all that garbage that we've created and given Iran the linchpin in dealing with. But the biggest mistake he's making, I think, is he doesn't understand the geography we're dealing with. He doesn't understand the people we're dealing with. He doesn't understand the resilience and the resoluteness of the people we're dealing with. He thinks we're dealing with, oh, wow, whom have we defeated in the last 50 years? Think about that for a minute. The last war we actually had that was successful was the first Gulf War, and it was the only one since 1945. So we're looking at a reputation for defeat, not a reputation for victory. And that man just kind of evinced the attitude and the words that accompany that kind of stance, in my view. We are on the back foot. We're going to be on the back foot. He didn't even talk about the Red Sea. He didn't even talk about what's happening there, what might happen there. He didn't talk about how we're losing all of our allies in the region and how we aren't going to get them back. And he didn't talk about what Larry was referring to with regard to the, from what I'm hearing, China should be cheering in the streets because we are using up critical munitions at a rate that is irreplaceable in any kind of time frame that might be justified.
Correct.
So we're just deepening our peril. And this general is there saying, let's deepen it a little bit further because just another bomb, just another strike, just another missile taken out. By the way, I wonder how many missiles they have left. I wonder how many missiles they can still build underground. I wonder how many times we're going to have to see those missiles operate before we understand what they have and what they can do. And I wonder when they're going to start letting those missiles operate on targets like Ras Tanura and maybe 12% of the oil coming out of the Gulf region and other things associated with it. And I wonder when we're going to talk about the things that Trump should have talked about in his speech last night, but didn't, like the fact we're not going to have any diesel. We don't have fertilizer. Farmers aren't planting their crops. I mean, this is bad stuff, and we're just ignoring it. And that general's totally ignoring it, as if he doesn't have any mind that goes beyond F-16s dropping bombs.
Yeah, he's so myopic, or there's a there's a phenomenon like when I'm teaching firearms and defensive pistol. If someone gets into a gun battle, they get what's called tunnel vision. They get so focused upon what's in front of them, what they're shooting at, that they lose perspective about what's going on around them. And that's exactly what you're seeing with General Keane and with the advisors around Trump, Stephen Miller and others. They're so obsessed with thinking that they can degrade Iran's ability to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. And yet they're not taking time to say, okay, how many Tomahawk missiles do we actually have? I think right now the total inventory globally is 2,500. And people say, well, hell, you just said there's only 1,000 targets there. So if we use one of those in each of those targets, voila. Except what we forget is that INDOPACOM, the U.S. commander for the Pacific, used to be called PACOM, Pacific Command. They've got a requirement for a certain number of Tomahawk missiles for their missions to accomplish, as well as same thing for the JASSMs. EUCOM, European Command, same thing. So when you spread out, they allocate what should be allocated to each of those commands, all of a sudden you realize we're at beyond the critical threshold. In other words, that once we start using those and we can't replace them for a combination of reasons that the Chinese control the rare earth minerals that are needed for the magnets that go into the precision guidance systems in each of these missiles. That we're right now, it's like we've cut our wrists and we're bleeding out, and we don't realize it, or we're not paying attention to it, and then they forget the depth that the Iranians have. Now, Keen was correct with it. He said, yeah, the surface drones, the underwater drones, the coastal defense missiles, the short-range ballistic missiles, the fast boats, all of those. And he forgot to mention mines. At some point, Iran can say, screw it. We are going to mine the Omani Strait. And they say, we may mine the entire damn thing. So nobody's going to get out until our demands are met. And to reinforce Colonel Wilkerson's point about the shortages, the oil that comes out of the Persian Gulf is what's known as sour crude. It's primarily sour crude, and that means it's got a high sulfur content, and that oil is used in the refineries out there that are going to produce diesel and aviation fuel need that particular kind of oil. And so it's both a refinery issue and a supply of oil issue. But the bottom line is we've got a global shortage of diesel and aviation fuel right now. And that shortage is only going to get worse with each passing week. And until that Strait of Hormuz is open, and let's say once you get it open and oil flowing back like before, you're looking at least of 2 months, maybe 3 months before you get back to a level where they can actually start replacing the supply. So what I'm saying is right now, so we're here in July, we're almost coming towards the end of July. So you got August, September, October. It's not, if things got fixed today, we would not even have any hope of getting back to normal until November. That is one of the big problems that they're ignoring.
And I think that's one reason that they seem to have sped things up, because they're beginning to realize that some of this background is there. And some of it is really, really inimical, especially to their interest of being reelected in November.
I was wondering how much of what's going on, Colonel, is related to the domestic policy or the domestic sort of interactions in the United States. Because we know J.D. Vance is desperately doing everything to make his case for 2028. That is different. But when it comes to the Trump administration, what are they gaining? How is that going to help them for the midterm elections?
I don't think it's going to help them at all. I think they're in deep trouble. No matter what dimension of it you look at. Just look at what just occurred, which I didn't think could occur with this administration. We had several mainline TV, that wouldn't broadcast his remarks last night. And we had others who were skeptical about it and actually mentioned their skepticism during or afterwards. This is a man who's losing his grip on the domestic situation. As a consequence, his party is losing their grip on the domestic situation. What was 100 or so voted against any more aid going to Israel? I mean, that didn't work. It didn't form a majority and make it work. But nonetheless, it's indicative. And it's indicative of the problem they're going to have in November. And I don't think they know how to deal with it. I'm worried that they might deal with it through force. And that would be a real tragedy for us. I think it might even lead to civil war. But I do think they are getting worried, deeply concerned about whether or not they're going to be able to hold on to power. And when I don't necessarily mean Trump, I mean the whole entourage, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the whole group who've enjoyed this kind of licentious power for so long, and they want to continue that. They want to keep it going. I think they're going to have deep, deep political problems in doing that. And this is just going to augment it. What Larry said is basically Putin has refused diesel outside Russia. We're looking at a situation where I think the diesel markets are going to be very grim in this country within 30 to 45 days. I think we're going to have truckers and we're going to have others who need that diesel representing an opposition. And most of these people probably, I shouldn't say this, but a lot of them are probably MAGA stalwarts. They're not going to be MAGA stalwarts after that. So you're looking at a disintegrating domestic political situation for Donald Trump, exemplified by last night's sort of coverage of his remarks. And you're looking at, and we haven't even talked about this, Ukraine, and Ukraine being at a crunch point probably in the next year, certainly, but maybe even earlier than that if we see a Russian move that is dramatic and quick and ends Ukraine's chance totally across the board, except maybe for guerrilla warfare. And then we are looking at a Europe, brain dead Europe, that said it's going to do so many things that is it going to do them? Are we going to have Ukraine in NATO by extension? I mean, even the Poles right now are revisiting. I say even the Poles. Warsaw is revisiting its relationship with Ukraine, seriously revisiting its relationship, as it well should be. Put these two theaters together, and I could see a real significant, almost existential problem for the United States over the next 12 months, one in Europe and one in Southwest Asia. And our enemies, such as they are, out there chortling us.
Shalom.
Not just because we're running out of essential munitions, but because we've shown how brain dead we are and how we can't. This leadership is incompetent in terms of dealing with these crises. And they are crises. They are crises.
Yeah, you got to look back at wonder what the hell was Trump doing in that speech Thursday night. It was essentially almost a declaration of war on China. Now, I've written for quite a while now. It was 6 years after, but that the 2020 election was stolen from Donald Trump, but it wasn't stolen because of the Chinese or the Russians or the Venezuelans and all that crap. It was done the old-fashioned way. Ballots were printed on Long Island, New Jersey. And I know this because my business partner actually, he has interviewed all the postal workers that were involved. He's identified the place where they were printed. The guy that was printing them was involved, had money laundering convictions, but they printed all these ballots. They were sent out and distributed, and they were stuffed into ballot boxes. That's how the damn election was stolen. And instead of Trump doing anything about that, he's blaming the Chinese. And when you go back and look at what he said, he didn't offer one
shred of evidence,
piece of evidence. Exactly. Not one. To say, the Chinese may have hacked the voting rolls. So what? Did they vote? No, well, we don't have evidence of that. So you got to step back and say, what the hell is this guy doing? Says, I have not yet seen the Chinese readout, but I suspect it was not one of, oh, we welcome the president's remarks. No, I think it's going to be a scathing, just takedown of Trump. So instead of focusing on, gee, how can we have a better relationship with China? We just sent a message, China, once we finish getting our ass kicked with Iran, we're going to come and get our ass kicked by you. That's the message.
And I would just add to that, name that as Anatole Levin had a piece yesterday, I think it was, in Quincy. Andrei Malachenko has just come out with an article in The Economist, of all places, because The Economist had to take him to task about it in their introduction of the article, because they've been absolutely brain dead in their support of what's happening to Russia and Ukraine. He came out almost like George H.W. Bush and the people surrounding him at the time of the end of the Cold War, and said, we need to get back to the kinds of things we were talking about at that time. And this is a guy taking a little bit of a risk to come out. He's one of the better oligarchs, if you will, better economic minds. And he's coming out not because, as The Economist intimated, that he wants to identify the rat that is Putin. He's coming out and saying, in essence, we need to get back to that time. We need to get back to dealing with one another again on a decent basis, on a don't call it friendly, just call it a capitalist basis that works. That's what he's writing about. That's what he's saying. This is the last chance, people. This is the last chance to reach out and grab that hand and not make Anchorage a farce, but make it a real diplomatic endeavor and return to some sort of decent relations eventually with Moscow. Otherwise, we're going down that road too. That road is paved with nuclear possibilities as well as Southwest Asia.
Larry Axis reported that the United States is going to expand its targets going more to the central part of Iran and hitting the infrastructure, basically. And then right now we've learned that in Kuwait, they started rationing power usage throughout the country after Iranian strikes targeted one of its major power plants. And Donald Trump said that Iran is losing very badly and we hold all the cards. And this is the situation. On the other hand, IRGC, just moments ago, before coming to this live, the commander of IRGC Navy warned the United States as the Americans are bringing themselves closer with every passing moment to the 0 hour for operation against CENTCOM's naval units in the region's waters. And this is basically it seems that they're moving more these weapons. I don't know, those aircraft carriers, 2 of them are in the region and they're going to use those. Are they going to move toward Iran, get closer to the Iranian borders? What is your understanding of that?
Well, if they get closer to the shore of Iran, they're going to get hit. And that's, Iran's putting them on notice right now. I think that those are I think a large, a growing percentage of the missile strikes are coming from carrier-based aircraft. And the strikes that Iran is carrying out on Muwafaq al-Salti and Prince Hassan Air Base in Jordan, those are the two, that's the principal location for much of the U.S. combat air operations. Apparently, they've used Al Udeid for the KC-135s for air refueling ops, but to my understanding is the United States has not forward deployed this combat aircraft in, say, the UAE at Al Dhafra or in Al Udeid in Qatar, Al Isa in Bahrain, and Ali Salman in Kuwait. And again, from Iran's standpoint, every day they're going to keep pounding. They're going to hit Kuwait if the United States carries out these attacks further in the interior and starts going after civilian infrastructure. Iran's going to take out the civilian infrastructure in Kuwait and Bahrain. They will become uninhabitable. They already hit the bridge yesterday and the U.S. hit the bridges in Iran, and Iran immediately turned around and hit the bridge that joins Saudi Arabia and Bahrain. There are no reports on how much damage was done. The Iranians also reportedly hit a U.S. special operations camp in Al-Tanf in Syria, and reportedly destroyed some equipment that killed American military personnel. There's been no confirming reports out of that from the Pentagon. But I would say the bottom line is Iran holds the strategic initiative over the United States simply because it has fewer targets to attack. And if with every one of those attacks, they are effectively driving the United States out of the Gulf. By making these bases uninhabitable, the United States can't just return personnel there overnight. No, they're going to have to spend a lot of money maybe to upgrade them, and it's not clear the United States is ready to do that. And so Iran's focus right now is there, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him turn to increased attacks on the carrier strike groups, number one. But then also can't rule out, I would say within the next 2 weeks, and I'm basing this upon what I've heard from a friend who was in Tehran for the funeral, and he was in Mashhad as well for the funeral of Ali Khamenei, that senior Iranian officials are telling him that they're going to have a big surprise for the West within a couple of weeks. One of those surprises could be, hey, we have a nuke. And so you're going to have to reconsider, because if you keep attacking us, we'll use it, that kind of thing. That would cause everybody to pull up. And I know the conventional wisdom is this, well, if Iran did that, Israel's just going to hit Iran with a nuke. No, not so quick. Because at that point, Israel's got to take into account, they got a nuke now. Yeah, we can hit them and take out Tehran. They can hit us, take out Tel Aviv and Haifa. And you take out Tel Aviv and Haifa, you don't have an Israel anymore.
You see how we're driving this, Nima? You see how we are pushing this and pushing this and pushing this, just like in Ukraine. We're pushing it to our own demise.
Yeah.
It seems that Israel currently is happy with the current situation because they're not getting hit. They're somehow feeling so comfortable in the southern part of Lebanon.
Yeah, and Bibi's feeling good too because he's going to lose. He's desperately trying to fashion laws that will protect him and his wife for the rest of their lives. And if Eisenkot wins, or any of that gang wins, then the situation is going to be roughly the same, but they're going to be just as desperate. Just as desperate. Your insinuation or your statement that they are building facilities in Lebanon in order to thwart whatever might be coming down the road. Well, what if what's coming down the road is what Larry just suggested, and how is Lebanon going to help you with that?
Carl, the air defenses in GCC countries somehow show that how they're short of interceptors, they're short of, that they don't have that much. The Patriot systems, by the way, I haven't seen that much of interception by these systems, by these, air defense systems. So, do you think that would be the same case for Israel? I assume that the main reason that the United States has decided to go with the MOU was because of their defensive capabilities when it comes to Israel. Because as you mentioned, they hit Dimona in the latest days of the 40 Days War. So if you're not capable, you're not able to defend Israel, what would be the solution? Coming out with some sort of MOU as that document, and then coming back to the war, saying that Israel is not part of the war. Right now, the war is between the United States and Iran, and GCC countries are the battlefield.
I think that's a non-starter. I think Iran knows who the war's with. Iran knows who the antagonists on the other side are. Iran knows what the Omani foreign minister said again for a second time. The problem in the Gulf region is not Iran. The problem is Israel. Said it in English again. I don't think you can divorce the two. We're locked at the hip, and they're against both of us. And we're forgetting about the situation that started all this, the Palestinians. That's why the Houthis are still in it. That's the way I interpret it anyway. And to a certain extent, the only defender of the Palestinians on the face of the earth that is doing anything concrete is Iran.
But
we just about forgotten about that. The Palestinians are back. All 300,000 of them that are buried underneath that rubble. We've just about forgotten about it, which of course is everyone's intent on our side. But I don't think it's going to work that way. I just don't think it's going to work that way. You're not going to exterminate. You're not going to perpetrate a genocide of the proportions of this one without something coming back at you. And right now, Iran is what's coming back at you. And it might just be existential for Israel.
Yep.
it seems the whole agenda is to weaken Iran militarily, and I don't know how far can they go in that direction. As far as I know, they're not getting.
Who do you mean? You mean the United States?
The United States and Israel. Israel is feeling they're not part of the war, so the United States is fighting the war.
Okay.
They may diminish Iranian power, Iranian strategic power in the region by fighting Iran and using GCC countries. And they're not the target of the Iranian missiles right now, for the time being at least.
Yeah, we're destroying our allies. We're destroying our allies.
But that could be, Colonel, when you look at Iran today, and when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, do you really believe that the United States is going to force, or do they have the firepower to force Iran into some sort of position to ignore about the Strait of Hormuz? I don't see that. What is your understanding of that?
I don't see it either. I just don't see it. Geography has its own power. And in this case, the geography has great power. And the geography is on Iran's side.
Then comes the second question. What is that all about?
Donald Trump trying to survive. He started this. Remember, he started this. Iran didn't start this. He started it. Clearly, he started it. And he's the one who's been continuing it. And he's the one who's violated every diplomatic protocol known to man. He's the one who's cheated. He's the one who's lied, stolen, bragged about it. He's the one who did all of this. He's responsible. And he don't like that because it's redounding to his discredit and ultimately to his political downfall, I think. I mean, that's what we're looking at. You think he'll survive in any way, fashion, or form that will be re-electable other than by force majeure in November if we go into global recession or depression even? I don't. I just don't. I don't see anybody on the horizon to take his place. That's the deficit we have right now, Nima, in this empire. We have no political leadership on the horizon and certainly none in place.
Yeah. Larry, when it comes to Saudi Arabia, Iran didn't hit. They hit all of these GCC countries except Saudi Arabia.
Mm-hmm.
And what is happening?
Saving it for last.
Yeah.
Well, I think a combination of, we've seen some very odd, let's call it odd behavior out of the Saudis this week. Now, so let's think strategically. Put yourself, you're the ruler of Saudi Arabia, Nima. And actually, I think you do a better job than MBS, but that's a whole nother issue. But you said, okay, what is it that we want as what do we need right now from Saudi Arabia? We need to get our oil flowing, and we've got a little bit going out through the Red Sea. So we need to keep that pipeline, Yanbu, open, flowing. The ship's getting loaded up with oil, and that oil going out. That at least gives us some cash flow right now. So here's my brilliant move. We're going to launch an attack on the Houthis, and then they're going to retaliate against us and probably destroy Yanbu so we can't ship out any more oil, and therefore they're going to cut us off from being able to export oil. That's brilliant. Let's do it, guys. Which is exactly what they did. And, the Houthis struck back immediately. They hit at least one airfield, possibly two, and threatened, hey, we're going to take out Yanbu. My understanding is that Hassan Munir, the head of the military in Pakistan, who's in close contact with the Saudis, basically called up MBS and said, what the hell are you doing? Stop being an idiot. Stop this. And then Pakistan reiterated that it would stand by its man, stand with with the Saudis protect them. But in essence, they told the Saudis stand down, and the Saudis have. We've seen right now that whatever they wanted to do at that point, they sort of kicked over the hornet's nest, and the Yemenis came flooding out, ready to go to war, and so now they've backed off, and so that's the good news. But it highlights that this is not just confined to going after Iran. There are all these other regional tensions. Now, with respect to the whole Gulf Cooperating Council, that's an ironic name for it, because the Saudis don't necessarily get along with the Emiratis. The Qataris were at odds with the Emiratis and the Saudis. So there's not a natural affinity out there. They'll piss on each other if given the opportunity. So this is Pakistan's trying to cobble together this pan-Islamic alliance that would unite, at least bring the militaries of Egypt, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Iran, working together in tandem to secure the area, secure it against Israel. But we are at least seeing that so far Iran's goal of expelling the United States from the region is being accomplished. The folks in Washington don't want to admit that, but that's exactly what we're saying. That's exactly what's going on.
Colonel, here is the Strait of Hormuz yesterday and the day before. And yesterday it was 8 vessels, and the day before 15, as you look at the map. And there is nothing going on in the southern part of the strait. As you see, they're all using the strait going to the Iranian, close to the Iranian part, and those designated routes of IRGC. And the main goal, I don't know if is still the opening up the Strait of Hormuz as the fight going on. What is the priority? General Keane said he was basically saying the main reason that they're destroying these bridges because they want to do something physically in the region.
Well, they want to keep them from being able to transport necessary material and so forth across those bridges up and down that side of the Gulf. I mean, that's obvious that that's what they're trying to do. I don't know, given the experience we had with the Serbs in the war in the former Yugoslavia, I don't know that that's a very sound way, even tactically, of operating, primarily because there are workarounds and there are ways to get around what's being done, which the Serbs proved in spades. But at the bottom line is your map just depicted and your movement just depicted, that northern channel is the channel that's primarily being used, and that means that people have recognized. I don't necessarily mean Iranians or GCC people, I mean shippers, insurers, and others have recognized whose portion of the strait is most tenable. And they've recognized who controls that portion of the strait the majority of the time. And you may say the southern side would be just as good because Oman is a neutral partner in here. And I would say, yeah, probably if the United States were strong-arming Muscat. But basically, I think you're seeing the realities of geography and the Iranians' position.
No.
And I don't think we're going to change that. Maybe temporarily for a moment or two we might change it, but it isn't going to fall back into that change. It's going to fall back into the natural geography and proximity of the Iranians to that geography. How would you change that? You would change that by putting, as I said before, putting 1 million or 2 million troops on the ground, marching from one end of Iran to the other, consolidating your hold on it, much the way we did on Germany post-World War II, along with a lot of Allied help, and staying there forever in order to do it. or installing, as we did for so long, the Shah, and having the Shah be our protector in the Gulf and be the one who controlled all that apparatus and that geography. There's no other way to do it. I mean, it's the reality of terrain, the reality of the geography, the reality of the peoples on that geography. We don't seem to have any cognizance of that whatsoever. I was talking with an Air Force guy yesterday about Kane. I said, look, the new provision that Powell implemented so powerfully with H.W. Bush, the new provision of the 1947 National Security Act, the Goldwater-Nichols Act provided, is a powerful chairman, to the tune of the chairman being able to tell the Secretary of Defense, in this case, Hegseth, you tell him, I'm going to see the president. I'm going over there and I'm going to talk to him personally. You're not coming with me. I'm going over there to see him. Now, of course, the president's got to, as Bush did with Powell twice, approve that trip and set up some kind of deal. He'd set up a luncheon one time and he set up a meeting in the Oval another time, and Powell won both arguments. That's the change. Does Kane even know that? Because we could, this is an Air Force guy, we could not understand how Air Force 3-star, even one brought out of retirement whose experience was not in anything but mostly special ops, could be so brain dead as to not be telling first Hegseth, and if that doesn't work, then you go tell the president. This is stupid what we're doing. We're just like Larry said, we're burning up all these munitions. We got other enemies in the world. We got a problem in Europe. Who's doing that? No one's doing that I can tell.
Yeah.
Larry, do you want to add something before leaving us? I know that you have another.
No, I think the good colonel summarized it best. You know, this is a feckless policy. That's not. It's going to. You know, I think we give Trump another week or two before he's going to begin begging. He won't be begging in public. He'll be claiming, "Oh, Iran's begging us for negotiations."
Yeah.
So I think we'll now. You know, they're in such desperate shape. We're going to give them a chance. This will be just the opposite. He's just projecting. It's going to be the United States desperate for a deal, and I don't know if Iran's going to be willing to give it this time. But anyway,
I think you're dead right on that. I think they've quit. They've given up on us. Totally given up on us.
I mean, if I was in their position, I would. So,
Yeah.
So, all right, guys. Later.
Okay. See you, Larry.
Down the latest developments that he has been covering. Here are the latest news from overnight. Iran has gone bridge for bridge. The United States bombed, I think, 6 bridges overnight. Iran targeted a key node, the King Fahd Bridge that connects Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. There was also a curious incident. Iran targeted U.S. bases in the UAE, and then there was also an F-35 emergency that occurred at the same time. No confirmed reports about any Iranian attack that did this, but of course, CENTCOM is always circumspect on this. We also have Bahrain getting hit very hard last night. Bapco came under attack and was hit, confirmed by Iranian missiles. Now, CENTCOM said that they hit dozens of targets all along Iran's southern coast. I know, Pepe, you've been covering exactly what these targets were, including in Chabahar, where Pete Hegseth was bragging about the port tower that collapsed after these strikes. And you recently wrote an article about how Iran, in these retaliations that it is taking part in response to U.S. aggression, is running the clock on the United States. So, Pepe, how about you help us understand this escalation ladder, what's going on in this war, And the Trump administration appears to be moving the goalposts now to China and election interference. But nonetheless, he says this war will be finished very soon. Iran seems to have other thoughts. To you, Pepe, what's going on?
Well, Danny, good to be with you, of course. Good to be with all of you. I mean, it's a very complicated day with me, with zillions of stuff to do. And if you allow me, I'm very pissed. And allow me to curse in street-style Brazilian Portuguese about what the empire of grifters is doing. Covardes filhos da puta. Okay, at least I spell it out. You know what these motherfuckers did? I was at this place. The Chabahar Port Tower is the port tower that controls civilian cargo and traffic in the port of Chabahar in Sistan, Balochistan. If you watch the documentary that we shot last year, The Golden Corridor, you have to go to the Press TV website. It's over there, the top documentary. There's a long stretch on Chabahar because Chabahar is the essential maritime node of, we can say, the Russian, Iranian, Indian Silk Road, the International North-South Transportation Corridor. So what these motherfuckers do, they bomb a corridor that they hated from the beginning. They bombed a connectivity corridor that will be one of the key connectivity corridors of the 21st century, and of course, bypassing the Suez Canal, bypassing the petrodollar, and of course, everything that transits through Chabahar goes to Asia. Chabahar in Sistan Balochistan is very close to the Iran-Pakistani border. It's now a sister port of Gwadar in Balochistan, in the Arabian Sea, in Pakistan. Is only 80 kilometers from Chabahar to Gwadar. And the Pakistanis are, when they liberated 6 overland corridors for Iran to export overland without depending on their blocked by the US Persian Gulf ports, Chabahar is a different story because Chabahar is already in the Gulf of Oman, close to the Arabian Sea. And of course, it's very much prized by Indian cargo ships and tankers, and also two gigantic Chinese cargoes who were unloading Chabahar at the time. A great deal of the infrastructure of the port was provided by Iran. So this is an international connectivity corridor, absolutely civilians. And these motherfuckers bombed it, and they do it. And we have the clownish Secretary of War bragging about it with a photo because they know they can get away with it. They won't get away with it with Iran because the response for this is going to be, and we haven't seen the response for Chabahar yet. This is going to be ultra hardcore. For instance, we don't know the extent of the damage on the Saudi Bahrain. I traveled this bridge as well, the Saudi Bahrain bridge, which would be okay. It's a long shot, but would be the equivalent of the Crimea bridge in terms of the importance. And engineering-wise, is quite something. But we don't know if it was really damaged or it was just a warning shot. From now on, it's not going to be warning shots anymore. So just wait for the Iranian response. But once again, cowardly and totally predictable. They started to bomb civilian infrastructure in Iran all over the place, especially all across the south. And all across the south, not only bordering the Persian Gulf and near the port of Bandar Abbas, which is the key port for Iran in the Persian Gulf, is Bandar Abbas, an enormous port. We shot over Bandar Abbas last year as well. We had a clearance from the authorities. They took us all over the port. It's a monster. And this is the key port for the Iranian export of energy. But Chabahar is also getting closer because the idea by the Iranians is to turn Chabahar into a sort of Shenzhen 2.0. The model for the development of Chabahar is Shenzhen. And that was great because I sat down with the guy overseeing the whole thing, And he explained in detail the plans for Chabahar is to turn it into one of the most important ports for Eurasia in the 21st century. So it's not an accident. On the contrary, the Americans bomb it because they're bombing a connectivity corridor. It's like they're bombing the Silk Road itself when they bombed the railways that were built and paid for by China, linking Iran with China. And they're bombing Chabahar port because they're bombing Russia, Iran, and China at the same time, because this is a keynote of the International North-South Transportation Corridor, 3 BRICS once again. So if we had a BRICS with balls, they would be already, rioting about that, but we don't. And we know that nothing's going to happen in the summit in September in New Delhi. It's an emasculated, as much as pains me to recognize it, but we, independent analysts, we deal with facts. Danny knows this very, very well. We and many of our other friends, we deal with facts. And the fact is, BRICS at the moment is beyond a joke. And we have one full BRICS member being bombed in terms of civilian infrastructure. And with a bombing like this, they are bombing 3 BRICS at the same time. This is beyond disgusting.
Yeah. And this also demonstrates, Pepe, that while the United States claims it is degrading Iran's military, it appears that the United States has actually conceded that it cannot degrade Iran's military, and it is hitting these nodes in an attempt to starve Iran and cut off Iran, which has been the plan for forever when it comes to
forever
for 40 plus years, cut off Iran from the rest of the world in order to destroy its system. Pepe, I wanted your comment. Oh, continue, please.
You're right, Danny. But it's simultaneous. This applies to Iran's foreign trade, and of course, the Iranians, if there's problems with Chabahar, the Iranians will more and more start using Gwadar port. It's very simple. They have the containers crossing the border, and instead of unloading in Chabahar, they can unload in Gwadar, because now they are practically working as sister ports. And this came from the top of the Pakistani government. It's very, very important. It's part of their evolving and trust relationship, which gets more complicated by the minute. We're going to talk about this in a few minutes. But in terms of the internal communications inside Iran, for instance, they bombed another place that I've been last year. Before we arrived in Bandar Abbas on the road, and there's a key bridge linking the south of Iran with Bandar Abbas port. They bombed this bridge as well. So the Iranians are very, very good in engineering, of course. I assume that they can rebuild this bridge very, very quickly, but it's going to be quite something. And of course, it's an intimidation strategy. It has the element of they're trying to isolate the south of Iran, Bandar Abbas, and the Persian Gulf from the rest of the country. There are many Iranians themselves in Iran that they are saying, what we're watching with this is that this could be the preamble for a ground invasion. Maybe not so. Maybe we shouldn't get there yet. And even if there would be some sort of ground invasion in the Persian Gulf, anywhere, especially in the region around Bandar Abbas, to the east or to the west, they won't be able to hold it. This is heavily, heavily, heavily dronified and missilized. So anything can happen. But essentially, what this latest dementia attacks on civilian infrastructure is to cause maximum damage to civilian life in Iran. There's no question about that. If there is an agenda behind it, coming from this bunch of lowly grifters, that's it.
I wanted your reaction to some of the other, because Iran has responded, but I believe Iran is actually still calculating its response. And I agree with you 100%, not showing all the cards. But this happened yesterday. According to the IRGC, they said that they targeted U.S. Special Forces in Al-Tanf in Syria in a surprise attack, saying that several high-ranking U.S. officers were killed and that a radar system was destroyed. CENTCOM was very quick to deny this, Pepe, in their very unconvincing manner. I'll pull that up. But your reaction to this, because BAPCO was also hit in Bahrain, which is a key energy hub for the Gulf in general.
Yes.
So Iran is really making a calculated response here, but your thoughts about it and maybe where, incrementally, and where it fits into your piece about how Iran is running the clock on the U.S.
Yes, they are running the clock, and of course they are upgrading, twisting and turning and perfecting their response spectrum on a daily basis. No question about that. There is, they don't want to reach a limit where they can provoke, well, it's very easy to provoke uncontrolled anger from a narcissistic megalomaniac with the brain of a 4-year-old. But there could be serious repercussions if this goes completely out of control. So their response is calculated to inflict damage, but up to a certain level. But of course, they have their red lines, and they already talked about the red lines over and over again. It's civilian infrastructure, and this is already happening. So for the moment is bridges, control towers in ports, highways, etc. So if we get over that, then we can expect the Iranian response to skyrocket. Let's put it this way. But since they control the clock, which is something that in my latest column, I made the point of making this very clear over and over again. They know that time is on their side, and they know that this is driving Donald Trump completely crazy. And that explains this, these attacks on civilian infrastructure. Is this going to change anything in the big picture? Of course not. Everybody knows that. Is this going to intimidate Iran? No. Is this going to bring them back to the table? No. There's only one thing that might bring them back to the table. And with that, Danny, once again, we enter into the immensely complicated situation regarding the mediation between the US and Iran, which is basically the Pakistanis, but also includes the Omanis, the Qataris, and even Turkey. Because now we have a different card that came out of nowhere. And believe me or not, even if you don't want to believe us, Larry and I are sending messages every day, 2 or 3, to our connections in Pakistan, mediators, said, look, we want a definitive answer to our question. What the hell is Saudi Arabia doing? So far, nothing. We receive enormous intel reports. The latest one I didn't even have time to read. And of course, nobody can explain, and even the Pakistanis who deal directly with Saudis because of their military pact, they still cannot explain what Saudi Arabia is doing. One of the echoes that we had is that in terms of the Iranian-Pakistani relation, this has not changed anything. But of course, it had to change because this was an attack on a very clear ally of Iran in the axis of resistance, completely unprovoked. Okay, the Saudis were saying, of course it was provoked. They were under an embargo. They cannot land planes in Sana'a airport. That's not the real story. The real story is that they have an MOU. Very few people around the world know that Yemen and Saudi Arabia also have an MOU, which has been in place for quite a while. 2017, I can't remember exactly how, but quite a while means a few years. But what did Iran do? And that's the direct Saudi Arabia-Iran connection. Iran broke the blockade of Sana'a International Airport, and they sent a Mahan Air flight first to go to Sana'a and pick up a Yemeni delegation and bring them to the funeral rites of assassinated leader Ayatollah Khamenei, and then they went back with part of the delegation. Some of them stayed in Iran. Some of them, in fact, are still there. Some of my friends, for instance, from Yemen, they're still in Iran. And with some other people who were in Yemenis who were in Iran that needed to go back home and they couldn't. So this de facto broke a blockade, and this blockade is completely illegal, totally illegal. So was this reason enough for Saudi Arabia to bomb the runway of Sana'a International Airport? And Iranian pilot, this guy is an absolute hero. In mid-flight, he went on a Hail Mary pass to divert to the west and then land at the very, very precarious runway of Hodeidah Airport by the Red Sea, which I would say it's a miracle. There's no other explanation. It had been repaired only a few days before. If this was a few days before, he wouldn't have any runway in Hodeidah to land. So why the hell would the Saudis do that? So for the moment, this is the major interrogation point. And of course, Larry and I, we are extremely worried about it, and it will condition how we are going to continue interacting with this information coming from Pakistan. This is an extremely serious thing. What we heard so far is that this won't interfere with the Iranian-Pakistani relationship. I find this very, very hard to swallow, really. Yeah. And of course, this introduces a new front out of the blue, and introduces a front that everybody have been trying to sing this song before it happens, which is what a Yemeni friend of ours defined as the Al-Aqsa Triangle. The red triangle. Suez Canal on top, Strait of Hormuz to the east, Bab al-Mandab to the south. And you get a triangle, and this blocks everything. So Saudi Arabia, by antagonizing Yemen directly, by bombing the runway of their main civilian airport, exactly, that's the Al-Aqsa Triangle. So if the Yemenis, this is something that is being debated in Sana'a. Should this be the right moment for us to enter the chat, or maybe later? If they enter now, or if they enter later, we all know what's going to happen to Saudi Arabia. Absolute disaster. Meaning, Bab al-Mandab blocked. The port of Yanbu blocked. The east-west pipeline could be hit. Saudi possibilities of exporting oil, now that they don't have Strait of Hormuz and the only one was Yanbu in the Red Sea, blocked. So they are going against their own survival interests. How can we possibly explain that? It's absolutely no wonder we haven't heard from Islamabad so far about this. Yeah, it's unexplainable. And of course, this could have been a maneuver inside Saudi Arabia. This is very, very dangerous. Don't forget that there are a lot of people, I wouldn't say part of the inner courtyard in Riyadh, but outside, who have a lot of grudges against MBS. This could be a direct attack on MBS, which, according to our Pakistani mediators, he is supporting all the efforts by the mediators, and also including the Qataris and the Omanis and the Turks, to find some sort of accommodation with Iran. So none of that, Danny, it's completely unexplainable and immensely dangerous. And Ansarallah and the Yemeni armed forces, there's, of course, Reuters describes them as the Houthis. This is a bloody news agency. Come on, I started in the newspaper business from the beginning. I am a newspaper man, old school. So we know how the rules of the game are. You have to be precise when you are a news agency. And these assholes cannot even describe Yemeni armed forces or Ansarallah, which would be the correct denomination, one or the other. So they're saying that they're just waiting for an order from Tehran to block the Bab al-Mandeb. This is not how it works. And all of us who actually went to Yemen, talked to members of the political council of Ansar Allah. And this was our case last year. And they explained to us how they make decisions. They took us everywhere. In fact, they showed us everything that was bombed by Saudi Arabia before the MOU. Can you believe that, for instance, these guys bombed Sada University in the north, the Saudis? They do the U.S.-Israeli playbook as well, and they applied it on Yemen.
Yeah.
So, so is this back again? It's quite possible with this bombing of the Sana airport runway. So this turns the whole game upside down. Absolutely. And as much as we're getting assurances from the Pakistani mediators, look, the Iran-Pakistan relationship is very solid because it's also personal. And they say, look, Arakshi, Galibaf, and Pezeshkian on one side, they are on personal communication level, interacting directly with Sharif Ishaqdar, the Pakistani foreign minister, and Field Marshal Asim Munir. So this is not only, it's government to government, but it's government to government at the highest level. Like I would put it on a Sergei Lavrov, Wang Yi mode. They talk to each other all the time. Apparently, this is how it happens between the Iranian leadership and the Pakistani leadership. But obviously, the Iranians now are asking questions. Look, you have a military pact with this. You have your prime minister doing a tweet where he says that an attack on Saudi Arabia is a red line for us. We know how to interpret this. We're not going to attack Saudi Arabia. First of all, we want to know what the hell is Saudi Arabia doing? Or what the hell do they think they're doing? So, this, I would say this alignment in terms of let's try to find some accommodation has also been bombed. And in this case, by Saudi Arabia. And guess who is pissed to death, but obviously they will never say it in public, Danny? The Chinese. Because the Chinese are supporting all these efforts. The Chinese are supporting the Pakistan, the back channel for the Pakistani mediation and the diplomatic power and legitimation is from China. Because from the way the Chinese see it, and this is the big picture, the Chinese see these two partners, one in South Asia, one in West Asia. One as a member of the Belt and Road in terms of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which is the most important and the most costly Belt and Road project. And the other one, the Iranian strategic partnership with China. And Iran is a partner of the Belt and Road as well. There are a lot of Belt and Road projects of investment in Iranian territory, railways, metro stations, you name it, everything. So the Chinese want these two on best possible terms because this is in the Chinese interest. And on top of it, as participants in Belt and Road and the whole thing, the whole diplomatic apparatus, you name it. It's a geopolitical and geoeconomic relationship. For instance, the Chinese suggested to the Pakistanis, look, open the overland corridors to Iran. If they are blocked and they cannot export on maritime routes, they use their overland routes because you have borders and you have all sorts of border crossing points. This is one of the things that are helping the Iranian economy. They can export via Pakistan. And the best way for Iran to export to China is not via Central Asia. It's too far away. Iran, Turkmenistan, going through Kyrgyzstan, arriving in Xinjiang. It's too complicated. It's much easier and faster to export via Pakistan. So all that impacts directly the Chinese. And obviously they are not happy with what's going on. There's no question. Okay, Danny,
Yeah.
this is the short story. It's much more complicated than that, but I'm trying to give you the short
No,
story.
it's great. No, it's great. I mean, you're hitting all the nodes, Pepe. And I wanted to now bring in also, Russia. Sergei Lavrov today commented that Ansar Allah, this says the Houthis, but Ansar Allah
Yes.
will close the Bab el-Mandeb Strait if the bombing continues. And when I've seen reports, Pepe, that if this happens, and now we've had days of reports, and Russia is also expressing validation of this concern that this may happen if this continues, that oil could go up to $200 a barrel almost instantaneously, given
Almost instantaneous. You're right.
given the incredible, it's like not just oil, it's global trade in general. A large percentage has to flow through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. So maybe you could talk about that in light of the fact that Iran has shown, and even just in these very reserved strikes, you could call them, for example, on the port of Fujairah, it was said to have been hit, and now we see actually that it's shut down. I mean, this is before and this is after the recent strikes that have occurred not a week ago, not only to super tankers but also to the port itself. No activity in the port of Fujairah around the Emirates. So, I mean,
Right.
Pepe, the empire is trying to whistle past the graveyard. Trump is trying to get us to focus on Chinese election interference, but it appears that even Iran's measured response is having an effect. It's having a real effect, and it could get far worse.
It's going to get far worse. They already have I'm sure you have seen, Danny. There's a list of ports in GCC countries that the IRGC is saying we're going to get them. And that includes Jebel Ali in Dubai. This is key. Jebel Ali is probably the most important point in that port. I'm sorry, in all that region. So this is once again what all of us were fearing: total escalation ladder. A few days ago was okay, maybe a little bit of escalation ladder. Now we are heading towards total escalation ladder. But of course, once again, from the Iranian side, very measured. For instance, if they attack the causeway between Saudi Arabia and Bahrain, it's not to disable it. It's as a warning. It could get much worse later. This attack on Fujairah apparently was not a huge thing, but it was enough to paralyze the port, as you showed in the map, completely. And even if this is a warning, so if they do this with Jebel Ali, which the Jebel Alis are the top ports on the planet in terms of cargo movement. Wow, and of course, if we have the blocking of Bab al-Mandeb, then our bets are off. Really, everybody knows that. And this goes much worse than when Goldman Sachs years ago, they were gaming the blocking of the Strait of Hormuz. They were saying, look, in a matter of 2 weeks, he can get to 150 a barrel. In a matter of 1 month to 2 months, he can get to 200 and even get to 500 after 2-3 months. We could get 200 in a matter of 1 week if Bab al-Mandeb is blocked, because then there will be zero oil being exported from West Asia. The global economy simply cannot live with that. Everybody knows that.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely, we are witnessing a major crisis. And I want your comment now on the Trump administration. Now, this is getting into another war or a restart of the war with Iran, talking about planning operations for Cuba, and now making the crux of what seems to be a domestic political campaign about China, about like literally putting a Chinese face on Russiagate. And now it appears the Trump administration, and I'm curious in your thoughts on this, doesn't really care, in the U.S. empire in general, empire of chaos as we call it, doesn't care about the consequences of this war on Iran, because he's promising, Trump himself, the big oaf, is promising these strikes are going to escalate. Now, power plants and oil, etc., oil saved for last, but there will be even further infrastructure strikes on Iran in the coming days. What explains why the U.S. empire seems to be so carelessly escalating, and now opening up multiple fronts potentially globally in this sensitive time?
There would be only one plausible, solid explanation for that. And Danny, this is not a conspiracy theory. I heard the same possibility of discussion from well-placed people, which prefer to remain in the shade. It's a calculated implosion of the global economy. Really. Let's blow it all up as our last measure, because we know it's not going to get better. And when we blow it up, of course, we can profit here and there. We can zero our unpayable foreign debt. We can restart all over again. So this would be the new meaning of the Great Reset. This is the only plausible, logical, rational explanation for that. Because everything that Trump is doing, and once again, this is something that you know, this is something that our audience knows. Trump is just a messenger, a lowly grifter as a messenger. He doesn't decide shit. Everybody knows that. So who's deciding behind? Their agenda is immensely ambitious. And it focuses essentially on neutralizing by all means necessary, and without getting into a nuclear war, these three so-called existential threats, which happen to be interlocked in strategic partnerships, Russia, China, and Iran. So what you just mentioned about China is not an accident. Of course, all that is interlocked. And now they're starting to become slightly more worried because Russia is losing their patience with a proxy war. So Russia is going to be on the, they're going to release the turbo in the next few weeks. And obviously this has to do with the internal situation in Russia, with pressure, with the fact that most Russians are saying that that's enough. And they know that this will get worse in terms of the attacks on targets and civilian targets inside the Russian Federation. It can only get worse. They understand that this is now a terrorist drone war against the Russian Federation. So obviously the pressure on Putin to be not as cold, calculating, and legalistic that his normal state, it doesn't hold anymore. It's not enough anymore. So can you imagine Russia consolidating its strategic victory in Ukraine, while Iran is consolidating its strategic victory in West Asia? There's not much left to these people running the show in the US. Then, okay, let's invade Cuba as a diversion tactic. Let's annex Greenland. You know.
Yeah.
So it's getting more and more dangerous because they are very, very smart people among these controllers of the narrative. There's no question about that. The dumb ones are in the front line. The dumb ones are the Pete Hegseth crowd. But this is just for public consumption. You know, this guy cannot do a simple math equation. But the big picture, which is empires at the end, usually is very, very, very ugly. And of course, in terms of the current decline, it's directly linked to more and more nations abandoning the petrodollar.
Yeah.
And of course, the internationalization of the yuan, what the emasculated BRICS at the moment have been trying to they are trying to perfect it for at least for the past 2 months. Alternative settlement means of payment in local currencies, multilateral currencies, a new currency, tokens, whatever. This is being studied by the BRICS too slowly, but they are doing it. And this is the BRICS' main mission. We need to establish solid global south linked alternative payment systems. So this whole let's put it this way, Chinese bullets train has already left the station and is picking up speed very, very fast, and there's no return. And the people behind the show in the US, the real ruling classes, they see that. And they don't have anything that, how are they going to counteract that? They can't. The way that the US is already fragmented and the US economy is a joke because it's virtual. The US economy now is Wall Street. They're not producing anything apart from pieces of shit of weapons that they sell as, and when people tried it, it's a total disaster. So
like the F-35s that fly over the UAE, and everyone's wondering if they got struck, but it's very possible that it just is not operating correctly, which happens all the time.
Right, exactly. So is there a plan B? No, because they never thought about a plan B. And that's what happens when empires become self-satisfied, which is the case. The American elites always thought that this free lunch would last forever. You remember? I remember the turn of the millennium. The 21st century is going to be the new American century.
Yeah. Or how about the fall?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, the fall of the Soviet Union. There is no alternative, right? That was all about. It was all about American hegemony. I mean, Francis Fukuyama would say, "Oh no, it's about neoliberalism in the U.S. just being at the head of it," but really, it was about U.S. hegemony and the model that you are describing. Right? Yeah.
You're right. It's so easy now that we are the only hegemonic power. It's going to be so easy, 21st century. Piece of cake. We're already sitting there. Right. So now you have a strategic alliance of peer competitors in Eurasia, China and Russia. You have China as the #1 geoeconomic power in the world. You have Russia as the most important nuclear and hypersonic power in the world. You have all the progression in terms of accumulating political capital all across the global south by Russia and China. And you have Iran, because of this strategic defeat that they just inflicted against all odds against America, is emerging as let's say, the most important middle power of them all. So it's amazing because the trajectory of going down is steady. It's really rolling, but rolling down all the time. Yeah. And on top of it, they have at the presidency of the United States this unqualifiable thing, in fact, completely manipulated in every aspect, and now even more deranged because he knows that he lost control of everything. He won't have control. He already doesn't have control on the oil market, on the bond market, on anything. Losing the midterm elections, everything.
And Pepe,
despite by the whole.
I was going to say in last night when Trump gave that speech, he was basically rating off of CIA note cards. This is a CIA project now, right? And it seems like it's trying to take advantage of everything that you just mentioned. Everything. The CIA is now, this is a great time to test out another election interference scam and reap all the benefits of that. It truly is so opportunistic, but Trump, when he was up there, he looked exactly what you just stated he is, which is a completely controlled figure. He was just up there. Oh yeah, the CIA told me this, and look how horrible it is. Oh, but they're telling me this, and it affected me negatively, supposedly, and so it's all good. But really, he's just doing their dance.
And it's even worse, Danny, because once again, because of the narcissistic megalomania and Milky Way sized ego, he doesn't read, number one. He doesn't listen to anybody, number two. Number three, he doesn't engage in intellectual discussions or conceptual discussions or everything that goes against his prejudices that are already established. Immediately rejected. Not to mention zero attention span. It's all there. It's very easy. The clinical evaluation and the psychological evaluations is actually very, very simple. You can have all the symptoms, in one full page. That's it.
Yeah. Oh no, continue.
And,
Sorry.
and of course, that's the pop culture element of it all. He always has to be posing as macho man. It's the only thing that it's in his mind. It's tragic. But once again, I think I said that in other podcasts. It's not tragic in a Shakespearean Greek tragedy way. It's tragic in a sense of a really, really trashy soap opera.
Yeah, and isn't it such a coincidence, Pepe, that after numerous reports this week, first a couple days ago, Chinese exports abroad have reached a record high, $412 billion in the last month alone on demand for green tech and AI. And as this happened, of course, yesterday, a Pew poll found that the majority of the world now views China more favorably than the United States, shockingly enough. And as this happens, then Trump starts talking about China stealing the U.S. elections. And I think this is very connected to the Iran situation because China's economic success and China's growing favorability mirrors what's happening with Iran, just under completely different circumstances. Iran is fighting a war, but has gained quite a lot of favorability around the world just for the simple fact that everyone hates Israel. A lot of people hate the Trump administration around the world. They see Iran fighting back successfully and they say, wow, that's pretty interesting.
True.
And then, of course, the fact that despite all the attempts that we covered earlier and that you laid out so completely around the targeting of interconnectivity, that's something that's incredibly difficult to stop, given that Iran and China's economic success in the long term, medium term, is going to have a lot of fruits for and bear a lot of fruits for Iran. So ultimately, it makes a lot of sense that the Trump administration, the U.S. empire of chaos in general, would start to again thrash about on many fronts, given that
you're right. Absolutely.
Given that it's all connected, as you said.
I'm sure you have noticed that the campaign of demonization of Xinjiang is also back. So it obviously all of it is completely interrelated. The big picture, which is something that many of us have been writing books about it, talking about it nonstop, is the process of Eurasia integration, which is it used to be slowly and surely. Now it's fast and surely expelling the US from Eurasia, period. They will have a minor presence in some nodes of Eurasia. Japan, South Korea depends. I'll be going to South Korea soon. I'm dying to see what's going on in South Korea at the moment. Singapore, but that's about it. That's about it. Everywhere else and across ASEAN, in Central Asia, where Russia and China are, these are the two real powers. In West Asia, depending on how it's going to be reignited. And of course, India, because the Americans, they want India to remain subservient. That's the only plan for India. It will never be a top ally of the US, and it will never be treated in equal terms. If it's subservient and it sends us a few good brains for Silicon Valley, that's about it. And of course, they have to oppose China as members of the Quad. That's it. This is the American plan for India. So this interconnection of the bulky parts of Eurasia, and including very important powers, BRICS members, SCO members, the integration with Central Asia as well. And the US presence a little bit everywhere is dwindling. Once again, slowly but surely, and now much faster. Because these nodes of the global south, they look at the war in Iran, they understand perfectly what this war is about. In energy terms, in terms of preserving the petrodollar, in terms that it's a war against the global south as a whole, it's a war against the BRICS. Everybody sees that. It's very, very clear. Of course, they have to hedge. For instance, Kazakhstan, which is a very interesting case, they are hedging. They know that they cannot antagonize the Americans. In their faces, there are a lot of American investment and interest in Kazakhstan. So they have to navigate this. But in geopolitical and geoeconomic terms, Kazakhstan, they know that their future is with Russia and China.
Oh, yeah.
It's obvious, absolutely obvious. So when the Americans look at that and say, okay, what means of pressure do we have? There are not many. You can, of course, do the only thing that you know how to do, divide and rule. So once again, Taiwan, South China Sea, Xinjiang, another color revolution in Hong Kong, which anything is possible. They will do it all over again. It's the only thing they do. Okay, Philippines, which is easy. Philippines is 40 families. And they alternate themselves. And which president we're going to elect next week? That's it. Philippines is a joke as a political system. So it's easy to control. But you cannot do this in Indonesia, in Vietnam, in Thailand, much more complex systems. So there's not much left for them. Okay, let's invade Cuba. Of course, in Latin America. Latin America is, I don't even start talking about it because it gets me in tears looking at the way Latin America is being practically everything on the huge, enormous. So the last stop will be Brazil, and anything can happen with this Brazilian, and anything can happen.
They're talking about it already. I mean, the United States is already talking about
the American interference. Talking about election interference, the American interference in these Brazilian elections is going to be something, off the charts. Because they know it's the last, this will be the cherry in their cake, the Western Hemisphere cake,
Right. Yeah, because it will be the last government. It'll be the last government that is part of that so-called pink tide. So, but really, it's a part of the last of the sovereign leaders that all of them have either been election cheated out outside of Cuba and Nicaragua, but on the South American continent.
Right.
But they've all been taken out by election interference, by election interference, by the United States. Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But does that alter the balance of power on a global scale? No. Latin America is too, let's say, off the map. Latin America is not Eurasia. The big game is across Eurasia. Even before Mackinder, everybody knew that. World history always knew that the center of the action politically is Eurasia.
Right. Yeah, and everything that the U.S. has done to Latin America, we've gone through these seasons before. It'll swing back and forth because what ends up happening is the U.S. sponsored leaders, governments, death squads, they tend to not govern well, and they tend to cause absolute mayhem on economic and political realities of people. So usually it swings back and forth. I don't know if we can trust in a couple years' time that the landscape, even in Latin America, will look the same. But Pepe, I want to ask one last question to you about the Saudi factor here, because
this is
China. People forget that China. The reason why China would be so pissed right now is China wants to keep relations good with Saudi Arabia and Iran, and it was the one who brokered that normalization process. Now Saudi Arabia is moving quickly, and I wouldn't be surprised in the next several weeks, Pepe, that Saudi Arabia now enters the fray in this restart of the Iran war, because all the entire winds are blowing in that direction. If attacking Yemen, which Saudi has had its butt kicked a few times by the Yemenis and by Ansar Allah, what stops Saudi Arabia from doing what it did earlier in the war during the first 40 days, which is foolishly be a party of U.S. attacks? What stops? I don't know. I don't see it. So your thoughts on this, because this was a huge deal for China, not only to solidify BRICS, but also to solidify its own relationship with and to ease tensions between two countries that are obviously going to be major players in that region for a long time, at least for the immediate future with Saudi Arabia, at least.
Well,
Your thoughts?
yes, and this has been a process. It started when the Russians. It was fascinating how hidden and kept from public examination this process was. The Russians approached the Saudis and the Iranians separately. This is how it started. Then they start to meet with Iranians and Saudis and Russians. And then the Russians said, okay, this is the first part. They threw the ball to the other side, to the Chinese. And they basically told the Chinese, look, you finish it and you can reap the rewards. It's okay. For us, it's we have good relations with both for a long time, but it's up to you to put them together, and then you cultivate your own relations with the three of us. So this was sealed in Beijing with the full weight of the Chinese government brokering a diplomatic deal between Riyadh and Tehran. So obviously this started to evolve because it started to involve Pakistan as well. I'm talking about how the Chinese were looking at the whole thing. It's absolutely fascinating. So they have two different partnerships, one with Pakistan, with Iran. They are neighbors, and one of them is a neighbor of China. And they're both part of the Belt and Road, different levels. So they have to be on best possible relations. So when the war started, the Chinese looked, oh shit, one of our key, let's say along with Saudi Arabia for oil, Iran for gas. One of our key partners in West Asia is being attacked by the empire. And we have our friend here on the side. He could lay a hand and lend a hand to Iran. So that was the beginning of this, what evolved into the Pakistan-Iran closer relationship, with the Chinese in the background providing all the, diplomatic support, and led to the MOU as well. Because the Chinese, from the beginning, this is a very Chinese foreign policy position. We want peace in West Asia. It doesn't matter how. We want free flow of trade. Doesn't matter how, even in the middle of a war. So this is their main rationale. So obviously they said, okay, we can use Pakistan to try to find a deal. So when you have breaking the MOU, means a break in the relationship with China and the relationship between China, Pakistan, and Iran at the same time. Yeah. Which brings us to the Saudi factor. From the beginning, everybody assumed that the Saudis were on board in terms of a normalization. The first meeting in Islamabad, I'm sure all of you remember. Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt. This was the first stepping stone that led to Islamabad meeting, and then led to the meeting in Switzerland. And after, of course, and then when we had the MOU, Trump blew it. But everybody knew that he would blow it anyway. But the problem is this relationship, China, Pakistan, Iran, that was solidifying. And in the background, we had Qatar, Oman, Turkey, Egypt, but also Saudi Arabia from the beginning. So now Saudi Arabia makes a move that directly blows up this conglomerate, and against an adversary that they know is going to respond. You don't mess with the Yemenis. This should be probably one of the first lessons in history. Never mess with the Yemenis.
Hey, China and Russia don't, and they get a lot of benefits from it, but the empire does, and they get a lot of.
The empire did. You saw what happened to the empire when they messed with the Yemenis.
Yeah.
So now Saudi Arabia, against their own interests and against this alignment of, okay, let's try to find an accommodation, right? They do this absolutely foolish move. So, that no wonder the whole thing is upside down. And it gets much more dangerous because of the military pact. So a few weeks ago, Asim Munir himself, Field Marshal, head of the army, the most important, the most powerful person in Pakistan, he went to Riyadh to talk to MBS face to face to upgrade their military pact. And that includes an attack on Saudi Arabia and an attack on Pakistan. So obviously the Iranians are looking at all that and say, oh, what the hell? We're going to help our friends in Yemen, obviously. We are not planning to attack Saudi Arabia, but how involved are the Saudis in terms of not attacking a member of the Axis of Resistance and maybe eventually start playing a double game and attacking us? So they need reassurances from the Pakistanis. And in the back, the Chinese are looking at all that absolutely horrified. Because from the beginning, they were putting this thing together.
Yeah.
So, it's an immensely dangerous crossroads that we are now. Immensely dangerous. And of course, the Yemenis never considered Bab al-Mandab as a card to be played immediately. For them, it was okay. If we get to a nuclear point, then we play our nuclear card, which is Bab al-Mandab.
It's a big
So
bang.
probably they won't play it now. But there's got to be some response. And obviously, there's got to be some intervention by the Pakistanis to tell the Saudis, cool down. One of the things that we heard, and I'm waiting for a confirmation today, is that the Pakistanis actually told the Saudis, cool down. Because then you're going to blow
and
us
it
all.
seems like they somewhat have. It seems like they somewhat have as well.
They somewhat have for the moment. Yeah, it seems like they somewhat have for the moment. Right. Which would be the only rational way to proceed, right?
Yeah.
But I think this is just an example for all of you of the whole thing hangs by a thread. One single wrong move, the whole thing collapses. And this thing that the Saudis did has the potential to collapse the whole thing. Hopefully it won't.
Donald Trump has restarted the U.S. war against Iran. The U.S. military's Central Command, or CENTCOM, boasted of bombing many new targets in the country, and Trump boasted that the U.S. will, quote, hit Iran hard, end quote. This came just 1 month after the U.S. and Iran signed a memorandum of understanding to try to end the war, and Trump sent U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance to participate in negotiations with Tehran. The U.S. government acted like it did want a peace deal to end the war, but if you followed U.S. foreign policy at all, you would know that this was always deeply suspicious, because just last year, in 2025, Trump claimed to be participating in negotiations with Iran, and right in the middle of those negotiations, the U.S. and Israel launched surprise attacks against Iran. This came just a few months after the U.S. government brokered a so-called ceasefire in Gaza, but then Trump gave Israel the green light to violate that ceasefire and restart its war against the Palestinian people in Gaza. So the message coming out of Washington is very clear. The US government cannot be trusted, and Iran cannot negotiate with a party that does not actually take any negotiations seriously. The US government is not committed to peace. There's a pattern here. The US has constantly violated every major agreement it has made. Of course, this would not be a surprise to Native Americans. Over centuries, the US government violated pretty much every treaty that it signed with Native American tribes, and Iran is now seeing the exact same thing happen today. However, as I'll be explaining in this analysis, the US has no way out of this war through the use of military force. Even mainstream Western media outlets have acknowledged that Trump has no path to victory. Even the New York Times editorial board admitted in mid-June, when Trump signed the initial MOU with Iran, that the US had lost this war. And yet now Trump is desperately trying to restart the war, even though he's digging himself deeper and deeper into a crisis that he's not going to be able to extricate the US from. Because, as I'll explain in this analysis today, Iran has significantly more leverage than the US in this conflict, and Iran can continue moving up the escalation ladder, whereas the US only has a few options, and all of those options are likely to make the crisis even worse. And of course, we're speaking here just a few months before midterm elections in the US in November, and it's likely that American voters are going to punish Trump for not only starting a totally unnecessary war of aggression, but continuing it again and again for months with no way out. Now, so much of the US war against Iran has revolved around the Strait of Hormuz. If you follow this conflict at all, you have doubtless heard this phrase. This is a very narrow body of water that is located right off the coast of Iran. And before the US started this war in late February, about 20% of the globally traded oil supply passed through this narrow strait on a daily basis. Now, after the US and Israel launched this war of aggression against Iran in late February, Tehran responded by shutting down the Strait of Hormuz. So in response to that, Trump announced a blockade of Iran's blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. And then after a few months of the conflict, in mid-June, the US and Iran signed a memorandum of understanding, and Trump said that the US military would end its blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Well, 1 month later, US Central Command announced another military blockade of the Strait of Hormuz as of the 14th of July. The US military strategy is to try to prevent Iran from exporting any oil, because Iran, like most of the countries in the Persian Gulf, is a petrostate. The government relies very heavily on revenue from selling oil and natural gas. So CENTCOM announced that it is restarting the naval blockade of Iran in the Strait of Hormuz. However, in response to the US relaunching this war and reimposing the naval blockade against Iran in violation of the agreement signed between the two parties, Tehran retaliated by announcing that it is also going to close the Strait of Hormuz, which means that the other Persian Gulf countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, which are also major oil and natural gas producers, those US allies are not going to be able to use the Strait of Hormuz to export energy. So it's not just Iran that is impacted by this blockade. And of course, all of the countries in the region rely very heavily on oil export. So this is really hurting the economies of all of the Persian Gulf countries. And this was totally unnecessary because the Memorandum of Understanding signed in mid-June had reopened the Strait of Hormuz. Iran was allowing ships from other countries to send oil through the strait without any obstacles. And it's not just that. After the US military started bombing Iran once again, Tehran hit back at the US allies in the region, hitting countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Bahrain, which host US military bases. Obviously, Iran doesn't have the military ability to hit the continental United States on the other side of the world, so it's retaliating in self-defense by hitting US allies and sites used by the US military in the neighboring countries. And when it comes to moving up the escalation ladder here, Iran has significantly more leverage than the US because the countries of the Persian Gulf rely very heavily on desalination plants in order to treat salt water to have drinking water. These are countries that have extremely low supplies of potable water. 90 to 99%, pretty much all of the drinking water used by the states of the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, come from these desalination plants. And thus far, Iran has not hit most of these plants, but this is really a nuclear option that Tehran has if the US insists on continuing to move up the escalation ladder. And I think Trump isn't really that concerned because it's US allies that are suffering the most. And Trump is notorious for often punishing US allies in order to benefit the US at their expense. But the point that I'm stressing here is that the more that the US escalates, the more options that Iran has that it could potentially take that it has not used. This is why the rhetoric coming out of Washington is absolutely delusional. Trump has claimed that he's going to, quote, wipe out, end quote, Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, which is totally not practical. It is honestly impossible. It is not going to happen. First of all, Iran is a large country with nearly 100 million people and a very significant military. Second of all, the command structure of Iran's armed forces has been decentralized as part of what it calls its mosaic defense strategy. So every upper level official in the Iranian military has 3 or 4 people designated below them. And if the official above them is killed by the US or Israel, those designated appointees will take the place of their superior. So the way that the Iranian military operates is that it can withstand these large so-called decapitation strikes carried out by the US and Israel. The Iranian military is built to survive a long-term conflict. We're not just talking about a few months, we're talking about years and years. The Iranian military will be the last institution to be destroyed or collapsed. So Trump is completely delusional. He has no idea what he's talking about here. Moreover, the US military CENTCOM keeps boasting about how it's bombing all of these Iranian military sites. But the reality is that the character of war has changed completely. We're no longer in the 20th century. We're in an age of technological war and drone war. And it's not just the Iranian military's command structure that has been decentralized, but also its tactics are almost guerrilla-style tactics of asymmetric warfare. And so much of this war has revolved around drones. So the US boasts of carrying out strikes and bombing all these conventional Iranian sites, but so much of Iran's military capacity is physically located underground, not only in these massive underground missile facilities, but also through the construction of underground drone facilities, where Iran has been making huge numbers of cheap kamikaze drones known as Shahed drones, which cost between 10,000 and 20,000 US dollars each. These are the size of cars, like a sedan. So these are massive flying cars, basically, that ram into targets and blow them up. It is impossible for the US military to stop this, given how decentralized the command structure is, given how decentralized the drone production is. Iran doesn't need a large conventional military like was used in World War II. Iran can shut down the Strait of Hormuz with a few dozen drones. It's impossible for the US military to stop this. These factors together explain why it was widely admitted by Western analysts that Iran won this war when many people thought that the war supposedly had ended in mid-June when the US and Iran signed the MOU. This is why the New York Times editorial board, the most mainstream media institution in the US, admitted that the US lost this war that Iran won. And yet here we are in mid-July, and Trump is now restarting the war. And even the Financial Times, the major British newspaper, has acknowledged that Trump has no path to victory. Honestly, the US has no plan other than just bombing stuff once again, like it already did for months. I want to read a few quotes from this report in the FT because it's very revealing in how openly these Western media outlets are acknowledging that the US has no plan. This is what the FT wrote. Behind Trump's bravado, it remains unclear how the US president will limit the economic, political, and diplomatic costs of the latest escalation, particularly as the midterm elections loom, and those will be in November. And the FT quoted a Republican political strategist, an ally of Donald Trump. Keep that in mind. His name is Ron Bonjean, who said, quote, Trump has seemed to come to the end of his rope on Iran. Reality is setting in that this is going to take a while. It could be months or years before this conflict gets resolved, end quote. The FT also quoted a former US government official who worked for the Pentagon who acknowledged that this war has become all about the Strait of Hormuz, which, by the way, was open before the US started this war of aggression. But Trump originally claimed that the war was supposedly about Iran's non-existent nuclear weapons program or about Iran's ballistic missile and cruise missile program. Those issues are no longer even really being discussed. Everything is now about the Strait of Hormuz. But again, I have to keep stressing this point. What is so insane about all of this is that the Strait of Hormuz was open before the US launched the war, and then Iran reopened the Strait of Hormuz in June after the US and Iran signed the Memorandum of Understanding, which Trump just violated unilaterally, and that's why Iran once again closed the Strait of Hormuz. So if the US wants the Strait of Hormuz to be opened, it has to make a deal with Iran. There is no alternative. Trump cannot bomb his way out of this situation that he dragged the world into in the first place. And by the way, while we're on the subject of extreme US government policy in terms of the Strait of Hormuz, I should point out that when Trump relaunched the war against Iran and the US military announced that it was restarting the naval blockade of Iran, Trump declared that the US government is going to be charging a 20% toll on all ships traveling through the Strait of Hormuz, which is hilarious because just a few weeks before, in late June, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that no country will be allowed to charge a toll on ships going through the Strait of Hormuz.
Well, that's the law. It's an international waterway. No country is allowed to charge tolls or fees on an international waterway. That's existing international law. That's the way it is in international waterways all over the world, and that's the way we expect it'll be here.
Now the US is doing exactly that. And what's even crazier is that Iran's proposal of charging a maintenance fee in order to maintain the Strait of Hormuz was $1 per barrel of oil that is transferred through the Strait of Hormuz. That is equivalent to a roughly 1% fee for the tankers traveling through the strait. Trump is now charging a 20% fee, way more, significantly more than Iran had even been proposing in the first place. So once again, we see how every accusation made by the US government about an enemy country is actually an admission of what the US government itself does. The hypocrisy is absolutely endless. But as if that weren't already all bad enough, the situation gets crazier and crazier because the Wall Street Journal has reported that Trump is considering significantly expanding the US war against Iran, and several options are being considered, including potentially sending US ground troops to invade Iran. Now, this is absolutely crazy. There is no other word for it. Iran is a massive country. It has a population of nearly 100 million people, and it's significantly larger than other countries that the US has invaded in other wars of aggression, and the US lost those wars. Iran is nearly 4 times the size of Iraq. Iran is 2.5 times the size of Afghanistan, a country where the US waged war for 20 years. They overthrew the Taliban, and then they left, and the Taliban is back in power today. Iran is 5 times the size of Vietnam, and after decades of war against Vietnam, the US lost that war as well. And the idea of sending ground troops is even crazier when you look at a map of the topography of Iran, and you realize that Iran is a very mountainous country, And mountains form a kind of natural border for most of Iran, and mountains surround most of the major cities like Tehran and Isfahan. So if the US is crazy enough to send a significant number of ground troops to try to invade, first of all, Iranians are going to fight, and it's going to be a brutal asymmetric war that will make the Iraq war look like child's play. And second of all, it would be extremely difficult for the US to invade in the first place because US troops would be sitting ducks if they tried to enter through the Strait of Hormuz, which Iran effectively controls. And the only other way that the US could try to invade Iran, realistically speaking, would be through the eastern border, because it's the only border that's not completely mountainous. But in order to do so, the US would have to invade from either Afghanistan or Pakistan. And obviously, the US just lost a 20-year war in Afghanistan. It's not going to be able to invade from there. And it's very unlikely that Pakistan would allow the US to use its territory to invade its neighbor. The Pakistani government is pro-US, but that would be catastrophic. They would also drag Pakistan into this war, which Pakistan doesn't want. Pakistan was trying to broker the peace talks between the US and Iran. So the idea of sending ground troops is just absolute insanity. Now, US military strategists obviously realize this. So one of the possibilities that they're discussing is a limited, in scare quotes, US invasion where the US sends troops to try to take over some of the strategic Iranian islands in the Persian Gulf. Especially, there's discussion of a US military operation to invade and take over Karg Island. And this is very important for Iran because a lot of Iran's oil exports are physically stored on Karg Island before they're shipped through the Strait of Hormuz. But this is also madness because they've been publicly discussing this for months now. Iran is obviously prepared for a fight over Karg Island. So this would be very bloody if US troops actually tried to take this island. It would cause significant casualties, and a lot of people in the US would protest and rebel, including Trump's own Republican Party base, at US soldiers who are losing their lives to try to take Iran's oil. I mean, the symbolism of that, the imagery is just absolutely crazy, and how absurd and blatantly colonialist and ridiculous all of this is. And thus far, I haven't even talked about another major problem in all of this, which is that the resumption of the US war against Iran has caused oil prices to once again skyrocket. The oil price is now around 84 US dollars. Before the US launched this war, it was around 60 US dollars. Now, it hasn't reached the previous peak during the war, which was more than $110, but still, there's a very real possibility that as the US continues to escalate this war, and if the US considers some of these crazy ideas like trying to seize Karg Island, this will likely cause the price of oil to spike even more as global investors and speculators fear that there could be a significant shortage of oil caused by more war in the Strait of Hormuz, where again, 20% of the globally traded oil passes through. This could cause a significant disruption to the global oil supply right at a time when many people were expecting that that disruption would end because they thought naively, foolishly, that the US would actually broker a deal with Iran as Trump claimed that he was going to do. And that's just the price of crude oil that I was discussing there. But another major factor to consider here is the price of gasoline in the United States. Because even though the global price of crude oil has fallen from its peak during the war, despite that, the price of gasoline in the US remains very high. Even after Trump signed the MOU with Iran, the price of gasoline did not fall that much. And this is a major problem for Trump and the Republican Party because the US has very bad public transportation. Pretty much everyone across the US relies on driving pretty much everywhere. And one of the worst things that a president or politicians could do with an election coming up in a few months is causing the price of gasoline to skyrocket. This is a major reason why Trump's approval ratings are extremely low. He's one of the least popular US presidents in history. His approval is in the low 30s. Just around 1/3 of Americans support him. Nearly 2/3 of Americans are against Trump. And he's alienated a lot of former supporters because Trump falsely claimed that he was not going to start any new wars. And he also claimed that he would bring down the cost of living and bring down inflation in the US. But inflation has been increasing once again because energy prices have been going through the roof, and oil and gasoline are needed to transport goods throughout the economy. So as the price of energy goes up, that causes an inflationary shock, pushing up prices all across the economy. And on top of that, it's likely that the energy crisis will get worse and worse as this war continues, especially if Trump escalates it further. And the US government is running out of oil in its Strategic Petroleum Reserve, the SPR. The current level of oil in the US SPR is at the lowest level since 1983. And the US government every week publishes new data. And if you look at that data, you can see that every week the US government is releasing more and more oil out into the market to try to bring down oil prices, but it's not working. In fact, just one day before Trump relaunched this war against Iran on the 14th of July, the Wall Street Journal published an article warning that the infrastructure behind the US government Strategic Petroleum Reserve is reaching breaking point. I'm reading here from the Wall Street Journal, quote, frequent drawdowns, wear and tear, and a lack of investments are straining the reserve, according to experts. The 60 Gulf Coast salt caverns that make up the stocks cannot be drawn from or refilled at the rate at which they were designed, federal researchers found. Equipment failures have bedeviled the reserve's managers. At one point, a well broke and caused the loss of hundreds of thousands of barrels of crude, end quote. The report added that Department of Energy officials told the Government Accountability Office that they are holding the reserve, quote, together with Band-Aids, and it is uncertain how long they will hold, end quote. That is the language of US government officials saying that they're holding together the Strategic Petroleum Reserve with Band-Aids. That's how desperate the situation is right now. And what is especially absurd about all of this is that Trump himself recently admitted that the oil reserves are running low, not only in the US, but around the world. In June, Trump gave a speech at the G7 summit in which he acknowledged that there were only 4 weeks of oil left in global reserves. And this is why he was defending originally signing the MOU with Iran and supposedly trying to negotiate a deal. Well, Trump has now torn up that deal. And by his own admission, there were only 4 weeks left of oil in the reserves. Those reserves are now going to continue dwindling as he's waging this war. So by his own admission, we are heading toward bedlam. That was the language he used. Economic bedlam, chaos in the global economy as countries around the world start running out of oil in their reserves, and the price of oil and all oil byproducts skyrocket, leading to more and more inflation. This is what the US is dragging the entire world into, a massive economic crisis and an energy crisis, in a totally unnecessary war where there is no way out other than seriously negotiating and coming to a deal. That is the only solution. But the more research that you do on this issue, the more you come to the realization that there really is no plan in Washington. Trump really thinks that dropping more bombs can solve every problem. And when the US relaunched this war against Iran on the 14th of July, the messaging coming out of the White House was totally delusional. The official White House Twitter account published an image of Trump saying, "Trust in Trump, no panicins." So they're just saying, believe in Trump, believe that we have a plan, even though there's no evidence suggesting that we actually have a plan. And even though we've been losing this war for months now, and there's no way we're going to turn it around, don't panic. Just believe in us. I mean, this is cult-like behavior. So I think we're all in a very dangerous moment here in the entire world because the US insists on continuing to escalate and wage this war that it cannot win because Washington refuses to accept that Iran is a major power, that Iran won this war, the US attempt to overthrow the Iranian government, to carry out regime change and put in power puppets, all of that failed. The US will never control the Strait of Hormuz, which is on the other side of the world. And most Western observers, even in mainstream media outlets, all have admitted that the US has no options left. Iran has won. And this is what's so scary about the situation is Trump is acting like a wild animal that has been backed into a corner and wants to try to fight its way out. But there is no fighting your way out of this situation. And what I'm really concerned about is the possibility of the US going even crazier, acting rashly. Who knows, even talking about nuclear weapons. You can't predict what will happen with the absolute chaos and madness happening in the White House right now. But what is clear to everyone is that this is the irrational behavior of a US empire that has overextended itself, that refuses to admit that it has lost, and is trying to drag down not only the region, but the world with it, because it refuses to accept that the era of US unipolar hegemony is over. The US cannot go around and overthrow any government it doesn't like and put in power puppets. That ship has sailed. We are in a firmly multipolar world. Iran's clear victory in this war only further demonstrates that. And if you want to understand the very important shifts that are happening in geopolitics and the global economy today, make sure you subscribe.
Coffee. Follow me.